George Galloway and the mother of all talk shows. Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway.
Happy Easter, Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Alleluia. And God saved the life of Gonzalo Lira, from whom we haven't heard since Friday when he agreed to come on the show. The airwaves are crackling with anxiety, even fear, at the sudden silence of the brave, intrepid war correspondent, a filmmaker, author, businessman trapped in Kharkov in the middle of the hell that is the war between NATO and Russia, being fought out over the dead bodies and the ruined buildings of the Ukraine. We still hope to have him on the show. Indeed, he's booked to be our very first guest, and we are trying frantically to reach him right now. And we'll be talking about Imran Khan, for whom millions of people have turned out over the last few days and nights on the streets of Pakistan, protesting the imported government forced on the people of Pakistan by an American organized regime change occupation. And of course, we'll be talking about the war. We'll be talking about Joe Biden, Hunter Biden. We'll be talking about Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak and Rishi Sunak's wife. It's all coming up here this evening over the next 3 hours. That's if we're not cancelled in the interim. We're currently broadcasting on more platforms than ever. To the usual platforms, add Rumble and Getter this evening. If you're watching on either of those platforms, you're especially welcome. If you're watching on Facebook, confound Mr. Algorithm and share with all of your contacts, all of your friends on Facebook. But however you are consuming this show, know this, that last week a record audience of 1,227,501 people watched all or part of the mother of all talk shows, a truly global open university of the airwaves. No show in the English-speaking world comes anywhere near close to the mother of all talk shows that you and we have built together. Fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy ride.
Curious about our curriculum? Have something to say? Then call us now to join the debate on the mother of all talk shows. The only education you can get for free. George Galloway, the mother of all talk shows. With George Galloway, the world is our classroom, and you're welcome to sit in and join the seminar.
There's going to be lots about cancel culture in the show tonight. Apart from anything else, our second guest this evening is the one and only Lowkey, the supremely talented and even more dedicated campaigning musician, songwriter and activist, who's in the teeth right now of an attempt to cancel him. This was a week in which some very big names indeed were cancelled off the mainstream social media platforms. None more important than the legendary Pepe Escobar, the Renaissance man who writes and broadcasts in multiple languages about all theaters in the world, economic, political, and military. A man followed by scores of thousands of people was disappeared just like that by Twitter in particular, though others have been strangling him regularly over the last few months. It appears that Pepe Escobar just told too many truths. And then there was the military and strategic giant Scott Ritter, a former U.S. Marines intelligence officer, a former head United Nations arms inspector, who dismantled weapons of mass destruction in the former Soviet Union and in Iraq. His take, his analysis on the war has now been taken from us. Like Pepe Escobar, brutally cancelled by the big mainstream social media platforms. Of course, you can still find both of these significant political, cultural, military, strategic figures if you go searching for them. But you do have to go searching for them. I myself am threatened with the removal of my right to travel outside of the country. In other words, my passport might be confiscated were I to make a television program in Britain for RT. Now, I have no problem with the British state deciding that nobody in Britain can watch me on RT. That's a matter for them and for the British people that should be taking them to account. But hasn't it come to something when a figure like me, almost 30 years a member of the British Parliament, I think most people would agree, a prominent voice in British politics for many years, a man who not even 1 year ago polled 22% of the vote in a parliamentary by-election. Someone like me, the leader of a registered British political party, the Workers' Party of Britain, a man whose work has appeared everywhere, from the Sunday Times to the Spectator to the New Statesman to the Guardian, all over the place. Over decades, you have been able to see what it is that I have to say. But if you are seeing me on Twitter right now, you are seeing me with a falsely applied label just underneath my name, which seeks to discredit anything that I have to say, and which comes accompanied by a shadow ban, making it extraordinarily unlikely that unless you go looking for my tweets that you will ever see them again. My lawyers, KRW Law, human rights lawyers in Ireland, have written to the world headquarters of Twitter in Dublin, warning them that if they do not remove this false label from me in 7 days, 7 working days, which is up tomorrow, then a legal action against Twitter to force them to do so and to secure damages for the harm that has been done by the false application of this label will ensue. I very much hope that by tomorrow a response is forthcoming, but I have my doubts. That's one of the reasons why I threw whatever weight I have behind the takeover bid of Elon Musk, who is offering a eye-watering $43 billion to own all of Twitter. Not because I think Elon Musk is the Messiah, not because I don't disapprove of many of the things that Elon Musk has done and said over the years that I have seen his output, but because give me Elon Musk before the kings of Saudi Arabia, because it transpires that the current board of directors of Twitter, who by the way own between them 0.12% of the company, and who are gravely imperiling, in breach of their fiduciary duties, their responsibility to look after the financial interests of their shareholders, amongst the mainstay of the current board of directors is the royal dictatorship of Saudi Arabia. Imagine, where they chop journalists into pieces, where they behead the truth in plain sight, where no one has any freedom of any kind at all to say anything about the system or the government in Saudi Arabia, are major owners of the public square, the biggest public square the world has ever seen, and are resisting the takeover bid of Elon Musk. You really couldn't make that up. But the truth is that they fear Elon Musk precisely because he is pledged to adhere to the free speech principles of a public square if he manages to take control of Twitter. Now, he may let us down. Donald Trump did, after all. But who are you going to back? The kings of Saudi Arabia, or the man who's publicly pledging to end this tyranny of cancellation, strangulation, false labeling of people, as is the current board of Twitter? It's not a hard question for me. It shouldn't be for you. We've got a poll running on it right now on my Twitter, on my YouTube channel, and on my Telegram channel. Should Elon Musk take over Twitter? A, yes. B, no. What have you got to lose? He can't possibly be worse than the people that are running it now. I read people saying we can't have an oligarch owning Twitter. We've already got oligarchs owning Twitter. And let's get this straight. The elected president of the United States of America itself was removed from Twitter by a board of directors beholden to, you guessed it, the kings and princes of Saudi Arabia. You really couldn't make that one up. And in the course of the show, we'll be talking about the war in Ukraine, the war that the United States and its proxy NATO have launched against Russia over the dead bodies of the people in the Ukraine, over the ruination of the country, the poorest country in Europe that was known as Ukraine. According to the Pentagon, the armed forces of the Ukraine are getting through every single day a week's worth of anti-tank munitions supplied to them by the United States. The Pentagon says that it is running short of anti-tank munitions because of the speed with which Ukraine is disposing of them. I don't know how many tanks were destroyed by 1/3 of the entire United States inventory of anti-tank munitions. Precious few if the evidence of this least photographed and filmed of wars is concerned. How many ruined Russian tanks have you seen destroyed by such a Mount Everest of munitions? I'll tell you what I think has happened to America's anti-tank munitions. I think they've been sold. I think they've been otherwise passed to third-party combatants. I think they're probably on the dark web already. I think we are storing up a gigantic problem in the continent of Europe itself of heavy weaponry in the hands of extremists of every type, of Islamist extremists, of Nazi extremists, of ultra-nationalist extremists. And we may very well rue the day that we have poured all these weapons without any proper accountability, and all this money without any proper accountability into a Ukrainian regime which before the war was a byword for corruption, regularly warned by the World Bank and the IMF that if they did not get a handle on the corruption in the country, there would be no more money. But hey, presto, when the United States needed Ukraine as a proxy for a war with Russia, all of that was forgotten, whitewashed. The role of Nazis in Western Ukraine and in the Ukrainian armed forces was whitewashed, and journalists in Poland, the leading journalist in Poland, a Jewish man, has just been sacked from the biggest publication in Poland for refusing to change his copy from Nazi Azov regiment to far-right Azov regiment. As a Polish Jew, he knows all about the Nazis and all about the Einsatzgruppen, all about the Western Ukrainian role in the Holocaust in the East, all about the Ukrainian role at Babi Yar. Now, of course, this war needs to come to an end. This war has been going on far too long, 8 years too long. I was trying to stop this war when most people had never heard of Donetsk, the Donbass, and cared even less. I was trying to stop this war when 14,000 people were being slowly, systematically massacred by the far-right Nazi Azov regiment along the line of control between the Western Ukrainian forces and the forces of the independent republics of Donetsk and Lugansk. I never wanted a Russian invasion of Ukraine. I didn't expect one. In fact, I bet my house that there wouldn't be one. Thank God nobody took me up on it. I was left looking foolish in my predictions that there would be no Russian invasion of the Ukraine. But now there is, and the war needs to come to a negotiated end. Far too many people have died on both sides. Far too many losses have been suffered by the Ukrainian and the Russian side of this conflict, whilst those who arm it, fund it, and proselytize for it sit with the 101st Chairborne Division around the sandpits in the television studios, egging them on for more and more war, when none of them or their sons have any intention of dying to preserve Joe Biden's war plan, to preserve America's hegemony in the world, which is sinking just like the sun is sinking at this time of the evening in the West. Time only for one other subject in my monologue. The Jalsa, the rally in Karachi yesterday of Imran Khan may have been the largest gathering ever of humankind on the planet. Millions and millions of people gathered in Karachi, not Imran Khan's heartland, to reject the imported government sent by the United States of America in a crude, laughably crude coup d'etat, regime change operation to remove the elected Prime Minister and his government. I'm not an Imran Khan man. I have never supported him before, but I do support him now, because I know a coup when I see one. I know a military coup when I see one. I know an American regime change operation when I see one. And I see all of those in Pakistan right now. The millions in Karachi, followed at least 500,000 in the far less populous Peshawar in the former Northwest Frontier province. It will follow the mass uprising that now exists in Pakistan all over the country, and now echoing in the diaspora in the great cities of Britain. And I myself will be speaking at some of those rallies. I'm not asking people to vote for Imran Khan. I'm demanding an election in Pakistan so the people of Pakistan can choose their own government free from foreign interference, and prove to the world that Pakistanis will never be slaves. They are free men and women, and they will exercise their right to pick their own government, whatever Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden have to say about it. So the slogan I support in Pakistan is not GA Imran Khan, not PTI. It's election now, free, fair election in Pakistan right now as the only way out of the crisis in a country of 220 million people, strategically placed, geopolitically placed in a place of the highest importance, and of course, the possessor of multiple nuclear warheads. A nuclear armed country is now in a state of absolute turmoil caused by the interference of the United States of America. We're going to talk about all of that and more over the next 2.5 hours and more, because this is the mother of all talk shows.
The airwaves. This savannah is a rigid dichotomy of fact and fiction. As Fisher says, the Twitter sphere where the slightest misjudgment can spell being cancelled. One species rules over the airwaves through its ability to adapt and survive in even the harshest environments. The George Galloway. The top cat in these parts, it is mostly active on Sunday evenings in Britain and mid-afternoon in the United States. It seldom roars during the day. Most notable for its wide variety of headdress, it protects these parts from the mainstream media. You can catch this fine specimen on the mother of all talk shows. Don't pick a fight with it. They've been known to bite back.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
It's with great regret and even greater sense of concern and anxiety and more that I have to tell you that there is still no sign of our first guest, Gonzalo Libra. We spoke with him on Friday and booked this appearance this evening. He has not yet logged in. We have not been able to contact him. Over the last hours, many people from around the world have been messaging me saying that it is some time since they heard from Gonzalo Lira, some time since he answered any personal messages. Now, some of those were prior to him answering ours, if indeed it was him that was answering. It is a matter of grave concern, close to an emergency, that this brave man, a Chilean citizen, and I hope the Chilean government is already cognizant of the fact that their compatriot may be in grave danger in Kharkov, in the Ukraine. You may or may not be familiar with the work that Gonzalo has already done. He has brought us right from the front line, the truth as he saw it, down there on the street, in and amongst the war zone in Kharkov. His testimony may be wholly correct, partly correct, completely incorrect, but it is his take. And as I have been saying, how can you possibly know that the information you are acting on is correct if you do not hear the other side of the story. This is really not rocket science. How can you possibly know that the story you're being told by your government and the media, entirely loyal to your government, is telling the truth? Have they a track record of telling the truth? Do the Donald Trump supporters in the United States think the American media are paragons of truth? Do the Brexit supporters in Britain think that our media is a paragon of the truth? Do the Jeremy Corbyn supporters in Britain think that our media is a paragon of truth? Those that know and lived through the lies about the Iraq War, the Libyan War, the Afghan War, the Syrian War, the Yemen War, do we have a government and a media that can be trusted? Only a fool would say yes to that question. And yet, so few people are speaking up against the monstrous imposition of absolute censorship of a major war, so that we see and hear and read the point of view our government intends us to consume. This is a monstrosity in a democracy, in a country that has no free speech, cannot possibly be called a democracy. Let me take some calls while I'm waiting for Gonzalo. Marcus is in Chorley in England on the line. Marcus, welcome.
Hi, George.
I don't seem to have Marcus. At least I can't.
Hello? Hello?
Now, I want to read some of this social media. The poll is going great guns. Should Elon Musk take over Twitter? 4,100 people have voted. And good news for you, Mr. Musk. Overwhelmingly, the answer is yes. Mighty Moth says in response to our poll, yes, I'd be interested what changes Musk would make to it. I preferred it in the days pre-algorithms. Your feed would show all posts of everyone you follow in time they were posted order. Same with Instagram. These days, algorithm stick their noses in. And Marek says, like him or loathe him, the fact remains that he says the way he wants it to be and would want it to be. And it's what we want it to be, a free speech channel. So it's no contest. Wasim Arshad says it will be more entertaining if Elon Musk takes over Twitter. And Richard Jenkins says, let's see, take it over, Elon, and show us who you are. Martin Tambert says, we need plurality in social media. Banning alternative voices is not democratic. Neither is it free speech tenets, often hyped but little practiced in the West. And Dav Khobiar says he's part of the establishment, and if he wasn't, he would never be where he is. Don't be deceived by the propaganda portraying him as savior of freedom and democracy. Should we just leave it with the King of Saudi Arabia then, Dav? Paul Anthony Taylor says, I, for one, would certainly like to see Musk take over Twitter. He's arguably the nearest thing to an anti-establishment millionaire. Let's try Marcus in Chorley again, see if we can get him. No, he's not there. We'll come back to him. So Kay says, yes, if he does and it turns out he's not for freedom of speech, then nothing changes. Exactly. Except the public opinion of him. If he does and makes freedom of speech a Musk win, then it will change the public opinion of many. Either way, it's a win. I mean, can anyone really argue against that? Barquero Juan Carlos says, yes, Musk is America's answer to oligarchy. More of the same, different name. Realize real special lies. Says Elon Musk depends on the American government for its Socialism for Billionaires program. He won't change Twitter for the better. Don't be a Twitter twit. Well, listen, Juan Carlos, are you happy with the way Twitter is? Why not then back change? I say back change, it's not got anything to do with you or me. Neither of us owns any shares in Twitter. So this is all being fought out over our heads. But insofar as we have any moral power, why would you back the status quo over someone publicly pledging to change it for the better? As the last message just said, if he publicly pledges to change it for the better, and he takes it over and he doesn't change it for the better, we will be no worse off than we are now. The only person that will be worse off is him, 54 or 43 billion dollars worse off. Is Marcus on that line? If he's not, get rid of him, please. Andrew Wrigglesworth, my old friend, says, can't vote because I really don't think it makes any difference. And I'm not going to be a billionaire oligarch cheerleader. Thanks for that, Andrew. Let's hear from Marcus in Chorley. Go ahead, Marcus.
Hi there, George.
Well, this man's been the most trailed call ever on the mother of all talk shows.
Come on. This. Hello.
All right. Now, Tony says, Rumble, Odyssey, Getter, Telegram, and Signal are free speech platforms. The US social media platforms are intelligence service tools or assets. And Ian Winter says, it concerns me that Vanguard and a prince of Saudi Arabia have huge shares in Twitter. These two alone will completely silence any objection to true freedom of speech. Pepsi Max says, should Elon Musk take over MOATS? That's how I read it at first. Well, Mr. Musk, if you'd like to be a sponsor of the show, as long as you don't dream of interfering in the content. That's the red line. That's the bottom line. Now, I've got to tell you that 3 weeks in a row, your donations have fully paid for the mother of all talk shows. And whilst I look for that elusive sponsor per hour or for the whole show, trust me, it's the best investment you'll ever make. Look at the size of the audience, for goodness sake. Look at the quality of the audience. It's the best deal any sponsor could possibly have. But whilst I search for that sponsor, and I have an important meeting this week on that, you need to keep the show afloat. And that's why I'm pleased to announce to you that you can donate at moats.tv/donate. moats.tv/donate. It's very important that you do. Many of you complained about PayPal. So we've moved to this medium. That's our website, moats.tv, and go to the button marked donate, /donate. You have to do it now. If you didn't do it last week, or the week before, if this is your fourth show without donating, then you're taking a free ride, and you are risking, for all of us, the continuing existence of the mother of all talk shows. A university with over 1.2 million students regularly every Sunday night. More than 1 million people are with you here on this platform. Do you want to see it go down? If you don't want to see it go down, go to moats.tv/donate. Go to moats.tv and look for the word donate and press it. I'm not asking you for much. I'm asking you for $1. I'm asking you for less than the price of a cup of coffee in even a transport cafe. Just send me $1. Send me £1. If that's all you can afford, send £1. Or send £5 and don't give again for the next 5 weeks. It's really not something I should have to be continuing to ask you to do. I've given up on Marcus in Chorley. I feel that he's probably pulling my leg. And I've got lots more social media also to go to. But coming up after the break, I've got Lowkey. Lowkey, an old friend of mine with whom I've traveled all the way to Gaza, is one of the most talented young people on the planet. His music, his songwriting, his writing in general, and his peerless activism has moved millions of people all over the world. So naturally, there's a big campaign to get him deplatformed so that his music will no longer be accessible by you. You'll see him in just a few minutes after this break.
Gosh darn, how do you get this thing to work? Is it that one? Is it this one here? Gosh, was this thing built in America? Jeez. Kamala, would you get in here? I can't get the, gosh darn wireless to work.
You know I can't answer questions, Joe, when I'm laughing.
I'm trying to, listen to that Scottish guy on the wireless, the Galloway fella.
Oh, Joe, you're so funny.
I've been pressing this red button on and off and on and off. Heck, I can't get it to work. Hello, Biden residence.
Mr. President, be advised, we have executed the airstrike on Syria. Confirmed.
That's just great. How long until it gets delivered? I'm starving.
Let's take a call. Go ahead, Kenny.
Hi, George. Yeah, I just want to talk about the trans issue that you were speaking about earlier.
Yeah,
I've got
go
a book in front of me by Douglas Murray, and he's got a paragraph here I'd just like to read out, if that's okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was standing on the corner at a quarter.
All right, I'll get him off. He's a nutter. He's a nutter. In the UK, it's 08081 965 522, and in the US, it's +1 844 944 3344.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
No need to build them up more. Here's hip-hop artist and campaigner Lowkey. Lowkey, welcome to the mother of all talk shows. It will come as a surprise to many that even you, an artist of global reach, are now threatened with cancellation. Tell us what's happened.
Thank you so much for having me, George. It's great to see you again after so long. I think it's important to establish, firstly, that the allegation of incitement for things that Palestinians do is quite clear as an excuse used by the Israeli state to imprison hundreds yearly. You know, the Palestine Prisoner Studies Center found that between 2015 and 2018, 500 Palestinians were arrested and imprisoned under the charge of incitement for things that they posted on social media. Many of them were journalists, and many of them were, in fact, children. You even had the example of a 15-year-old in Jerusalem by the name of Tamara Abu Leben, who wrote the words, "Forgive me," on her Facebook, and her house was raided by the Israeli police. because of this. You had the example of Darin Tatur, who wrote her poem "Qawim ya Sha'bi Qawimhum," resist them, my people, resist them. And she was also arrested and spent 3 years from house arrest to prosecution in court. She spent 5 months in prison, where she used the zipper from her hoodie to write on the wall of her cell. Now, the very same allegation of incitement is being used against me by We Believe in Israel, led by Luke Akehurst, who describes himself as previously serving as a political consultant to arms companies for their arms sales to the Ministry of Defense. It's obviously the project of BICOM, the largest Israel lobby group in this country. And so the allegation is that my song, Long Live Palestine, incites violence. And, you know, because of that, I'm facing a campaign to push my music off of Spotify. But also, in addition to that, I'm facing a campaign against me in universities to ban me from being able to speak in universities. It's a sorry state of affairs, George.
Now, Long Live, you've written many great songs, but Long Live Palestine is, I think, your masterpiece. I think, so far at least, it's the thing that you will always be remembered for. It's hypnotic, rhythmic call that the Palestine dream must never be allowed to be forgotten. It's a piece of artistic genius. And this is what they're calling an incitement to violence in Palestine?
Yes, this is what BICOM and We Believe in Israel are calling. So, of course, you know, you will have had some experience, I imagine, and their proxies over the years. It's a lobby group that has worked with AIPAC, the famous Israeli lobby group in the United States. It's led by Richard Pater, who is currently in the reserves of the Israeli occupying forces and previously worked for the Israeli Prime Minister in the Prime Minister's office. So how is it you can have a lobby group which is literally led by somebody in a foreign army, which has all types of relations with both the Labour Party and the Conservative Party in this country? And it's really that campaign, pushing that campaign forward, that, you know, we are seeing. But at the same time, George, we have been fortunate enough to gather support from many, like Roger Waters, others, prominent people in the music industry, former UN Special Rapporteur, one of the princesses of Jordan. You know, we've been very, very fortunate to receive support from unexpected places, and we will continue to assert the sanctity of Palestinian life and assert my right to make music about Palestinian life.
Now let's break down the two fronts. I don't speak in many universities now myself because, as you infer, I have myself faced similar difficulties to you. But what's happening? Are you being uninvited by universities, or is it when you get there, there's a mob waiting to try and stop you speak?
Well, I mean, the truth is, George, that what you did with Viva Palestina really broke the mold. You caused a real glitch in the matrix by bringing people like myself and others and taking us to Gaza to meet with the Palestinians and to support them. So, of course, it's not a surprise that their mobilization against you would be ferocious. What we're talking about with Cambridge University, I was due to speak there. And then following on from that, I was, of course, due to speak at the NUS. And both of these were blocked by a sophisticated mobilization of different forces, both on and off campus. And again, hand in hand with the mainstream media in this country, really across the spectrum of what is considered the acceptable left to the more right-wing side of things, with the Daily Mail and, of course, that touchstone of the establishment, the Times newspaper, and the Daily Telegraph, of course, becoming involved also. And so what that meant is it forced the societies which were inviting me into quite difficult positions. And of course, it's the cynical use of, a definition of anti-Semitism, which is, of course, agreeable to the Israeli government and is largely focused on the idea that if you criticize Israel, you are therefore now defined as an anti-Semite. We are, of course, talking about the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which says that if you say that Israel is a racist endeavor, for example, then you are now making an anti-Semitic comment and you are an anti-Semite. And so that has been used to great effect to chill freedom of speech in universities. We've seen thousands, George, across these years sacrificed at the altar of this this lie. People have lost their livelihoods. They've been disqualified from the right to participate really in politics in this country, and throughout the Corbyn years, the Israel lobby fortified its forces to no end. And so really this is the logical extension of that. Of course, it would begin to extend its hand into the artistic sphere. And we've seen, as I said, literally children arrested for things that they've posted on Facebook with the very same allegation that this is an incitement. But, the truth is that costs have been incurred in a PR sense to them for this campaign. And if they were to succeed in removing my music from Spotify, I don't think that it would be a positive thing for them in a PR sense. But, at the same time, we have to be realistic and we have to look back very critically about the mistakes that were made in the past that allowed us to get to this point. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, and really they haven't been sufficiently faced off, in the past, I would say.
Now, of course, as we speak, the occupied city of Jerusalem is in turmoil. The holy place, the Al-Aqsa in the old city of Jerusalem that I know well, was invaded on Friday in the early hours at the Fajr prayer, the dawn prayer. Guns were fired, smoke bombs fired, stained glass windows broken, priceless, ancient stained glass windows broken, hundreds of worshippers on the floor being trussed up and arrested. We are exceedingly close to a general outbreak of unrest throughout the occupied lands, aren't we?
Yes, and I think what we also have to understand about what's happening in Al-Aqsa, this is part of a push by a grouping called the Temple Movement, which its stated objective is the demolishing of Al-Aqsa and the replacing of it with what they refer to as the Third Temple. For them, what we call the Al-Aqsa compound is the Temple Mount. And the Temple Movement's official body has stated in the past, we must liberate the Temple Mount from the murderous Islam. The movement has also in the past published a blueprint and computer animation of what Al-Aqsa will look like once demolished, and a depiction of the temple being built on top of its remains. The leader of the temple movement is Yehuda Glick, who is a US-born Likud party lawmaker and former part of the Israeli intelligence corps. The movement has been funded by the Israeli government through the pumping of millions into it by the Ministry of Education. It was also funded by a former Deputy Defense Minister, Eli Ben-Dahan, while he served in that position. He describes Palestinians as beasts who are not human. Other funders of the push include Lillian Jean Kaplan Foundation and Henry Swiker, who also funded Tommy Robinson and Ben Shapiro employing David Horowitz Freedom Center. The chief rabbi of the temple movement, Yisrael Ariel, has called for the destruction of mosques and Christian spires and said if that is not accepted, you kill all of their males by the sword. This is quite genocidal language. And, the chief rabbi of the Temple movement was given an award by the mayor of Jerusalem for his work with the Temple movement. You also have the support of the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Hotevli. She supported the organization, speaking at its events, saying that her dream is to see the Israeli flag fly over the Temple Mount. Other supporters of the idea, of course, include the Justice Minister, Elliot Shaked, and the architect of the anti-BDS Ministry of Strategic Affairs, Gilad Erdan. So what must be made absolutely clear to everyone watching, horrified what is happening in Al-Aqsa, is that you have a concerted push which is backed by key Israeli state institutions to demolish Al-Aqsa. And it is my great fear that a lot of the normalization that has taken place with Arab states in recent time is very much serving as a precursor to the realization of that policy. And of course, that would be a disaster for everyone, no doubt.
Is Sir Keir Starmer supporting all of this without equivocation?
Well, Sir Keir Starmer, of course, is funded by key Israel lobbyist Trevor Chin, who is a key figure at BICOM. This is the parent lobby group of the lobby group trying to get me kicked off of Spotify. I'm sure that if asked about it and if forced to respond, Keir Starmer will give us nothing but sweet nothings about what is happening in Palestine. I see no indication that he would show any type of resistance to these policies.
It's a sorry state of affairs. Stay safe, brother. Remember the reason I'm wearing a hat, and make sure you've got someone with you at all times.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Now, from a caller, Gonzalo Lira was apparently on Scott Ritter's show earlier today. We don't know when that was recorded, of course. But Gonzalo says he now has no access to the internet. We're still trying to fix that to reach him. But if true, it means that he is alive and well, at least, for which we must be truly thankful. But we'll still seek to get him on the show. The poll is, I think, headed towards a record. 5,100 people have voted. Should Elon Musk take over Twitter? Yes, 78% on Twitter. No, 22%. On YouTube, yes, 73%. No, 27%. And on Telegram, yes, 77%. No, 33%. So if you're watching Mr. Musk, overwhelmingly the viewers and voters on the Mother of All Talk Shows want you to go and succeed with your takeover bid. The telephone numbers, in case you don't have them, if you're in the United Kingdom, 08081 965522. That's 08081 965522. And it's completely free. You call us, we'll call you back. If you're in the United States or Canada, it's also toll-free. Again, will cost you nothing. +1 844 944 3344. That's +1 844 944 3344. You can email the show anytime at onair@moats.tv. And remember, we need your donations to pay the cost of this show. Let's go to our old friend Eve's in Idaho. Go ahead, Eve.
Hello, George. I wanted to tell you that as the situation worsens, your show is rising, and under your leadership, your listeners are becoming a community.
Thank you.
I wanted to talk about. Yes, I wanted to talk about the French election. I don't know if you have noticed, but on May 10, 45 seconds after the poll closed, Jean-Luc Mélenchon asked the people not to give one vote to Marine Le Pen. Now, Marine Le Pen and Mélenchon are the same voter. 50% of the people who lose their eyes were voting for Marine Le Pen, 50% were voting for Mélenchon. I'm talking about the yellow vest, the people who oppose the vaccine mandate. Half of them vote for Marine Le Pen and half of them for Mélenchon. And what the French are using to prevent. So another thing is that 75% of their platform is identical. In particular, the opposition to NATO and the possibility to make a referendum if you have 500,000 signatures, which means that 90% is the same for both, because if they have a disagreement, like the veil, for instance, they can sort it out with a referendum. And the old trick that the French are using is that they say that Marine Le Pen is a far right, that when in front of them, they know what's the far right. The far right is in Ukraine. Zelensky is allied with the far right. And so I would like you, if you know
Supported by Macron.
Mélenchon, that's right. Macron is the one.
I've met him, but I wouldn't claim to know him. He did say that not one vote that was cast for him should be cast for Marine Le Pen. As far as I know, he did not ask his voters to vote for President Macron. And so that leaves open the possibility of perhaps a mass abstention in the second ballot. Of course, whether or not that would change the final outcome remains to be seen. It's also quite likely that the blue-collar, working-class part of Mélenchon's vote, which, by the way, was not the majority of his vote. His majority of his vote came from white-collar, university-educated people. But there was a section of his vote that was proletarian, blue-collar workers, and I don't think that they will heed Mélenchon's call. I think many of them, particularly those that were former partisans of the French Communist Party, will heed that vote. So I'm not one of those who thinks that next Sunday's election is a foregone conclusion in any way, Yves. But you're right to make the point that the candidate I supported, Jean-Luc Mélenchon, having done splendidly well, but not well enough. And ponder this, Yves. If the odds and sods from Trotskyites to Social Democrats had not stood, then this ballot next Sunday would be between Mélenchon and Macron. He was just 1.5% away from being in the final ballot himself. And hundreds of thousands of votes were wasted on absolutely hopeless, ultra-left, far-left candidates who allowed the narcissism of the small difference to force them to oppose Mélenchon's campaign. Yves, thanks. I'm glad we are back in touch. In the second hour, we have the magisterial Professor Richard Wolff, the man who really should be the President of the United States of America. But first, it's the news with Elliot King. Stay tuned for the second hour.
Radio Sputnik News.
Britain's Home Secretary Priti Patel was warned by her top civil servant that there was not enough evidence of the deterrent effect of the plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. In a letter, Matthew Rycroft said the policy's value for money relied on it preventing illegal channel crossings. He said while there wasn't sufficient evidence of the scheme's benefits, that did not mean it wouldn't work. The Home Secretary replied it would be imprudent to allow a lack of modelling to delay the scheme. The exchange between Patel and her permanent secretary was published by the Home Office after it emerged she had issued a rare ministerial direction to push through the plans, meaning she takes personal responsibility for it. Under the £120 million scheme, which was announced last week, people deemed to have entered the UK unlawfully will be transported to the East African country, where they will be allowed to reapply for the right to settle. A huge queue of trucks has formed on the Poland-Belarus border as a Russian and Belarusian drivers try to leave the EU following a sanctions deadline. In the run-up to the Saturday deadline, the line extended to 80 kilometres, with some stuck for up to 32 hours. The EU has banned lorries from Russia and Belarus, except those carrying medicine, mail or petroleum products, from entering or staying in the bloc. The move is part of the sanctions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Drone footage filed by Reuters news agency shows long queues remaining as the midnight deadline neared. Hours after the deadline passed, the waiting times had been shortened to 12 hours, with the number of trucks at two border crossings between 230 and 400 vehicles. However, it is unclear what will happen to thousands of other trucks from the two countries estimated to currently be on EU territory. Northern Korea says it has successfully tested a new weapon, which it says will significantly enhance its tactical nuclear capabilities. Photos show the country's leader, Kim Jong-un, smiling and clapping as he watches the new missile's launch. Experts believe this is a sign that North Korea is planning to test a compact nuclear weapon soon. In other words, a tactical nuclear weapon. North Korea stopped nuclear testing back in 2017. The following year, it blew up tunnels at the Pyongyang nuclear testing site in a move that was seen as part of a diplomatic reapproach with South Korea and the US. New allegations have emerged regarding lockdown parties in Downing Street, with the Labour Party claiming Boris Johnson has deliberately misled the British people at every turn. The Prime Minister has already been fined once for breaking COVID rules on his birthday in 2020, but that is said to be regarding at least problematic of a series of incidents. Johnson is understood to have been present at 6 or at least 12 gatherings being investigated by the Metropolitan Police, including that Bring Your Own Booze one in the Downing Street Garden on the 20th of May 2020. The Prime Minister's fines for breaching lockdown rules is the most severe constitutional crisis involving a Prime Minister, an eminent historian has said. History of government expert Lord Hennessy says Johnson has broken the law, misled Parliament and shredded the ministerial code. The Prime Minister is the first serving Prime Minister to be sanctioned for breaking the law. Speaking after news of the fine was announced, he said his people had the right to expect better from him. Johnson has said since it did not occur to him at the time that the brief gathering in the Cabinet Room to mark his birthday in June 2020 could be in the contravention of COVID law rules. He is known to have attended at least 2 further events, of 12 being investigated by police, meaning he could be fined again. 5 people have been arrested after 2.9 tonnes of cocaine, worth about €72 million, was seized on a fishing boat on the Canary Islands. The AKT-1 was stopped by the Spanish Coast Guard and escorted to Las Palmas, the capital city of Gran Canaria, on Wednesday. Spain's El Dia newspaper reported that the police and tax agency were also involved in the operation, and officers were waiting ashore when the vessel arrived. A spokesman for the Spanish Civil Guard said, "We are trying to confirm the amount of drugs on board." Pictures were published showing officials on board with at least a dozen large white bags on the back of the boat. Pope Francis has urged leaders to hear the people's pleas for peace in the Ukraine. Speaking during his Easter Sunday Mass to some 50,000 people in St. Peter's Square, he said, "Our eyes too are incredulous on this Easter of war. We have seen all too much blood, all too much violence. Our hearts too have been filled with fear and anguish." And finally, Fatau, a western lowland gorilla believed to be the oldest in the world, has just celebrated her 65th birthday at the Berlin Zoo. The zoo wrote on its Instagram, "Our gorilla lady is celebrating her 65th birthday today, making her the oldest gorilla in the world." The traditional birthday cake could not be missing this year either. The birthday meal is always something very special for Fatau, the zoo has said. Photos included in the post show the huge primate enjoying a cake decorated with berries and fruits to form the number 65. The gorilla arrived to Berlin in 1959 through what the zoo described as unusual circumstances. A sailor used the young gorilla to pay his tab at a tavern in Marseille, France, after which she was transported across Europe before eventually being purchased by the zoo in Germany. She was estimated to be just 2 years old at the time of her arrival. In 2019, Fatau was named the oldest living gorilla in captivity by the Guinness World Records after Trudy, a gorilla born in 1956, passed away. That's all for now. I'm Elliot King.
You're listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Welcome to the Open University of the Airwaves with George Galloway. Only on Sputnik Radio.
Still no connection to Gonzalo Lira, nor any confirmation that he was live on with Scott Ritter, but we are seeking to contact Scott Ritter to establish that latter point, and still desperately seeking Gonzalo Lira. He made a very clear commitment to appear on the show tonight. It's not in character for him simply to disappear. So we'll keep you updated throughout the show on that. Now, our website got so much traffic from you. Apparently it crashed. I'm not entirely clear what happens next, but I will update you. Keep trying. On the website, that's MOATS.tv, MOATS.tv, and then go to donate. But please, if you cannot get through, donate on PayPal. It's extremely urgent and extremely important. We already lost the midweek show for financial reasons. I really don't want to miss a show that's reaching 1.2 million people, and I'm sure you don't either. Should Elon Musk take over Twitter? A, yes 78, no 22, yes 73, no 27, yes 77, no 33. Almost 6,000 people have voted, and there's still another hour or almost an hour for that contest. So please make sure that you vote. I was so excited earlier that I forgot to ask you the first question. So I'll ask you it now. On this day in 1961, 1,400 Cuban exiles landed in Cuba in a doomed attempt to overthrow Fidel Castro. Where did they land? A, Bay of Pigs, B, Bay of Plenty, C, Wineglass Bay. I'll give you the answer in due course. Peter is in Warrington, but wants to talk about Russia. Peter in Warrington, is that not where they make the vodka? Warrington, Peter.
Yes, you're right. They used to make vodka in Russia.
Not that I'm a vodka drinker or anything else, but it was in my mind that association between Russia, vodka, and Warrington, and you want to speak about it. So go ahead, Pete.
Well, I think the Russian situation is rather interesting. My understanding is that the Russians are buying a lot of gold up at the moment, and I think the currencies are going to be changing in value. What's your take on the situation?
Well, we'll get further and better from Professor Richard Wolff, who is the Oracle, later in this hour when he comes on the show. But the bare facts are that the sanctions imposed on Russia are hurting those that imposed them far more than they're hurting Russia. Because Russia has real things that real people really need. And those real people exist all over the world. It has gas, it has oil, it has coal, it has mineral resources, it has neon, it has nickel, it has precious metals of all kind, and perhaps most importantly, it has wheat. It is the largest producer of wheat in the world. And the second largest, Ukraine, is presumably not going to have all that great harvest this year. So the price of Russian wheat has risen very significantly, as has the price of their gas, their oil, and so on. So if you want to measure it with the ruble is worth more to the dollar today than it was the day that the sanctions were imposed, which tells its own story. Everything that Russia was going to sell to its west, it has now sold to its east, probably at lower prices, but it has sold all of it to the east. So we're in for a long, cold summer, Peter, and the Russians are not.
The gas is managed properly. We've got plenty of gas in Morecambe Bay and the North Sea. There should be no shortage of gas in the UK at all. And I think...
No, I agree with that. The UK is far less exposed, but still too exposed to fluctuations on the international scene. I have campaigned for many years that Britain must be energy self-sufficient, and it is more than capable of being so, with a mix of oil and gas and wind and wave and coal and nuclear. We ought to be energy self-sufficient. We should be, we could be, we must be. Do you agree?
We are. I think there's geopolitics going on, and it's engineered. I think there's no shortage in the UK. I think most countries around the world have got enough energy. We're on an energetic planet. There's oodles of power resources, and it's about politics and geopolitics. That's the problem. A country like Russia should be extremely
by the way,
prosperous.
geopolitics that is quickly, sorry, Peter, geopolitics that's quickly thrown overboard. It's only a couple of months ago at the COP conference in Glasgow that all these green targets were announced, and they've all been ditched. Coal is going to be king again in Germany. Nuclear is going to be king again in Europe. So we are not as badly affected as others, but on the European mainland, they are in very deep trouble as a result of the sanctions. They were all in such a rush to multiply and apply. So the geopolitics changes. And look, as someone long and closely associated with the British mine workers and their union and their communities, I say this: it's time that we reopened, such as we can, those that Thatcher didn't flood irrevocably, that we reopened our coal mines. We're standing on top of 1,000 years of our own energy resource called coal. And today's carbon capture technology would allow it to be used perfectly safely. Last word to you, Peter.
Well, I think we need a mixed basket of fuel. Yeah, I agree with that. We should keep some of the coal stations open. But if you want clean air and you want healthy people, is coal the right way to go? I'm not sure it is. Would you want to work in a coal mine? I certainly wouldn't want to go down there and get the coal out. And I think that's the problem with coal. But it's right to have a mixed strategy. I think we've got that in Britain. And I think there's no shortage. I think they're engineering the shortages. And I think the price of petrol and diesel is engineered. It doesn't need to be up at £2 a litre. It's wrong that they've pushed it up so high. I think I know why they're doing it. They're trying to bring in hydrogen and battery-powered vehicles. That's fair enough. But why not just say so instead of this game of charades that's going on? It's not fair on the British public. the government are not being straight with the British public. The newspapers and the TV are not being straight with the public, and it's about time that people put pressure on the governments to give us the truth on these things. It's not on. It's not fair.
A British government not being truthful with the public. Heaven forfend. Peter in Warrington, thank you very much. Let's stay in England, go to Liverpool and talk with Ray. Go ahead, Ray.
Hi, George. I'd like to talk. Yeah, all right. I'd like to talk about like this. The UK on the Rwanda deal. I would say like the Rwandan people are more happy to take in these illegal migrants in, but I just think that Boris Johnson is getting like criticised. Like he's been called like a racist, and people will say, "Oh, Britain's a racist country for sending illegal migrants to Rwanda." But I think Britain is a tolerant country. I mean, look at other countries that are not tolerant. Denmark's not a tolerant country. Why is no one saying they're a racist country? That's what I'll say.
You're so tolerant you want to send the people coming across in dinghies straight to Rwanda, Ray? Is that your measure of tolerance?
Well, I'm saying like I think we should have like limited borders. And I'm not saying like we should have unlimited immigration. That's what I'm trying to say.
No, I'm with you on that, and I've been criticised rather fiercely for that over recent years. Only a lunatic believes in open borders. Only a lunatic thinks that most of the people coming across the channel illegally, being trafficked from a safe country to a safe country, are not economic refugees. That's exactly what they are. I cannot muster any ill feeling towards them for being economic refugees, not least because my own grandparents were economic refugees from Ireland to Britain. So if I was living in a poor country, I would try to be an economic refugee also. But I wouldn't expect the citizens of the country I was trying to get into to just allow anybody and in whatever number to come here. We have to have a proper immigration system. We should let in the people that we need, not the people who manage to bribe a people trafficker and manage to brave the waves of the English Channel in order to land on the beach here. Talk about a hit and miss system. You couldn't get more hit and miss than that. The people that are arriving may have lots of skills, not many skills, no skills at all. They might be as honest as the day is long, or they might be crooked. They might, some of them, even be terrorists. They may want to harm us. They may want to help us. How can we know? We cannot know with these arrivals coming illegally across the English Channel. But the answer is not, I fear, to send them to Rwanda. First of all, Rwanda is the world's most successful dictatorship. The president there has rewritten the constitution so many times that he can remain president until 2034. He's a big mate of Tony Blair, if that tells you anything, Ray. And Israel tried this very wheeze of sending its illegal migrants to Rwanda, and it didn't, of course, work. And this will not work either. And my prediction to you, Ray, is that it will not even be tried. It's a piece of window dressing, piece of headline grabbing to take attention away from the Partygate fines that Boris Johnson and other ministers have suffered. We do need to solve this problem, but I don't think the Rwanda option is the way we're going to solve it. Now, in an act of seasonal anarchy, on Easter Sunday, our next guest is Santa Claus. He even looks like Father Christmas. But in fact, he's a candidate for election to succeed the Alaska Congressman Don Young, and his opponent is Sarah Palin. So we've got Santa Claus pitching up against the wicked witch of the East, Sarah Palin. Santa Claus joins me now, and those are words I never thought I'd ever say. Good evening, Santa, or should I call you Mr. Claus?
Good evening, George. If I can call you George, you're welcome to call me Santa. Thank you for asking.
Santa, it is wonderful to see you on the Mother of All Talk Shows. Tell us, first of all,
thank you for inviting me.
What this election is. Tell us what's this election all about, and is Sarah Palin really going to be your opponent? Because if she is, I'm headed for Alaska to campaign for you. I've got my winter boots on already. Go on.
Thank you very much. This is for the U.S. House of Representatives to finish Don Young's remainder of his term, which ends this calendar year, essentially. And I'm in the special election, which is just for those several months before that term ends. People have been asking me to go for the 2 years after that, but I'm not sure that I'm going to do that. My campaign is probably something you'd be interested in, mostly because I'm independent, progressive, democratic socialist. Some of that should resound, and some of it sort of positions me directly in opposition to Sarah. Sarah was up here a lot longer than I've been, and she has some baggage from way back when. So I'm trying to turn a new leaf for whoever might succeed me in that particular office. And I'm not spending more than $400 on my entire campaign. So that should be a real signal saying no outside influence. Nobody's going to be, that's pretty independent, I think.
That's fantastic. I don't know what you get for $400 in Alaska. Probably not
you get a
much.
Website.
Are you therefore going to be mainly campaigning online?
Yes, thank you. Social media.
Well, this is a good boost to your campaign. There's more than 1 million people will see this interview over the course of the week. Are you the official Democratic Party candidate?
No, I'm not. That's what I meant by independent. I'm not affiliating with any particular party. I'm just independent. And that's a big deal up here. Back when Senator Bernie Sanders was running against Hillary Clinton up in Alaska, years ago, I was one of his alternate delegates. And when it came time for the primary, the Democratic primary, he garnered 82% of the vote up here in Alaska. So that's a little bit different from a lot of the rest of the United States.
What's the electorate like in your constituency? Describe them in class terms.
We're sort of evenly split almost. We have as many Republicans as Democrats, essentially, and we have more independents than we have either Republicans or Democrats. So the independents have a huge say in our elections up here. I tend to lean more towards the Democratic side and more liberal.
But what's the demography of the constituency? Is it working class? Is it peasant? Is it farmer, fishing? What is it?
It's mostly working class, and I know you've been a big advocate for the working class through the years, as have I. I'm a big union supporter over here, and we have a thing called the PRO Act, which I think is eventually going to succeed, which gives unions a lot of protections. And one of the other issues here is our health system. You've heard of Medicare for All, I'm sure, by now, and that's another thing I'm championing.
Yeah. And does Sarah Palin know yet that she's going to have to face Santa Claus that everybody in the world loves?
She filed after I did, so I'm sure she does know. And the funny thing is, what I've been hearing from a lot of people, I think it's amusing, but we'll see how it plays out. Years ago, she was earning Pinocchio awards because of what she was saying. And Pinocchio, as we know, is related to untruths or lies, depending on how you look at it. And some people have characterized this race as Santa versus Pinocchio, because the two of us have the highest name recognition among the 48 candidates who are in this particular race.
Well, I have no doubt. Now, I hope it's your second name that places you on the ballot paper, because you'll be quite high up on a list of 48 with the letter C. And she'll be quite far down with the letter P. And these kind of things count. Do people vote in person or by post, or has that changed recently?
Thanks for asking. Yes, it changed recently. We are doing this particular special election by mail, and the deadline for voting is June 11th. So people are encouraged to send their ballots in once they start receiving them from the government here. We also have ranked choice voting. Maine did it, state of Maine, and now we're trying it up here in Alaska. And that kind of switches the entire way people kind of deal with the voting. One thing that I wrote a while back, which I'm just going to refer to, ranked choice voting reduces partisanship, encourages more candidates to run, boosts voter turnout, takes power away from special interests and out-of-state influence, and makes it almost impossible for anyone to rig an election. So that's why I support ranked choice voting. It's the first time we're trying that up here.
Yes. I think that will work in your favor. I don't know if it's the same in Alaska, but Santa Claus usually comes down our chimneys with presents for our children. You, if you're only going to spend $400, will not be distributing any presents. But what's your platform? What are your main three policies?
Well, as I mentioned before, Medicare for all, union support, child tax credit, a wealth tax on the tippy-top wealthiest in the United States, remove the cap on Social Security contributions, social media platforms, which I think is something you're particularly interested in now with Musk getting into the fray. So Musk, and Twitter versus Facebook. I, in particular, was on Facebook years ago. I left in 2018 after saying a fond farewell to my beloved 309,000 followers, which isn't too bad. That came from my running in the 2008-2012 presidential election, by the way, advocating for children's issues, child health, safety, and welfare. And I think with the social media platforms, I left Facebook because I disagreed with the company itself, not the platform. And now that I'm on Twitter, Twitter refuses to give me that little blue check mark, even though I'm a candidate for federal office. And they sort of throttle the tweet, distribution, et cetera. So I'm not too happy about that. I'm not so sure if Elon Musk getting into the fray is going to make it different, whether it's privately owned, like with Zuckerberg, or if Musk owns it, or if it stays the way it is, Twitter in this case.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put in a word for you with Elon Musk, and we'll see if Santa Claus can't get a blue tick. And I hope everyone watching this follows you on Twitter. Just Santa Claus, is it?
No, it's Santa Claus for AK, which is the abbreviation for Alaska in the United States. So Santa Claus for AK. Yeah, they limit it to 15 letters.
You can count me as your follower right now, Santa.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it.
Many of our viewers back you, and I wish you every success in the special election in Alaska.
George, may I give you a quick blessing?
Would be the best Christmas present anyone could. Yes, go ahead. Sorry.
Thank you. May I give you and your viewers and listeners a quick blessing? May each of you have a lifetime that's filled with happiness, peace, good health, prosperity, and most of all, love, which is the greatest gift.
Amen. Thank you very much indeed. It would be the best present anyone could receive to see Sarah Palin defeated in that election. Santa Claus must be your man. Should Elon Musk take over Twitter? 6,000 people have voted, and it is still overwhelmingly a yes for Elon Musk. Words I never thought I'd say. In this week in 1968, the right-wing Tory MP Enoch Powell slated the country's immigration policy. What did the speech become known as? A. Funeral pyre. B. Rivers of blood. C. Foaming Tiber. Answer after the break. Big thanks, obviously, to all our subscribers and listeners to the MOATS podcast. For the older amongst you, a podcast is the distilled version, about half as long as the 3-hour mother of all talk shows, which has become a phenomenon on the internet. And also my new Wednesday show, The Galloway Show, which I hope you'll tune into on my YouTube channel, exclusively on YouTube on Wednesday at 7 o'clock. That's also got a podcast, which has also gone off like a rocket. Now, you get them on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. But in recent weeks, the podcast has been the #1 political podcast in Algeria, Ghana, Oman, Namibia, Ecuador, Slovenia, Zimbabwe, Malaysia, Bulgaria, Iceland, Kuwait, Costa Rica, South Africa, Saudi Arabia, Tanzania, and now in Singapore, #1 in those countries. The podcast's also a regular in the top 50 of China, please note, Russia, France, Spain, India, Israel, Brazil, Pakistan, Canada, Hong Kong, and Japan, as well as being active in 79 other top 100s around the world. So it's a media phenomenon, and it's tearing up the mainstream media monopoly. Please download it on Apple or Spotify and leave us a 5-star review, like Sanam in London, who said, George, I've been watching your show for a long time, and I must admit that you are a true leader and very courageous man to carry on your work of exposing the truth and showing us the other side of the picture, which always gets blocked by the US and the West through their media. God bless you always. Sanam in London. Very touching, Sanam. Thank you very much for that.
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
Well, I don't know what's happening with the website, but please keep trying moats.tv and go to the donate option there. I'm only asking you to give £1, that's all, for a 3-hour television show, £1, or $1, or €1, that's all. If a good number of you did that, then we would have no further financial worries. And I'd be able to tell Mr. Elon Musk, if he wanted to sponsor us, that there was no need at all for that, because the public were doing the job. But in the event that that doesn't happen, we need your support. You've got the phone numbers, I think. I hope you are enjoying my Wednesday Galloway show. The numbers are very encouraging. 54,000 the first week, 76,000 the second week, and this last week, the third episode, I think 50-something thousand on the whole show, but on the clips about Imran Khan, out of the park. On TikTok, on Twitter, and everywhere else, the clips are, I mean, uncountable so far, astronomic. So that's on Wednesdays at 10 p.m. exclusively on my YouTube channel. Do subscribe to it, please. So the answer to the question was, of course, Rivers of Blood in this week, 1968. Let's take Kevin in Grimsby, who wants to talk about Hunter Biden. So do I. Kevin, go ahead.
No, it was Elon Musk, really. I mean, I can talk about Hunter Biden, but
that's all right.
It's much of a more, you know,
right.
I mean,
talk about what you'd like.
George, please just hear me out on this. You know, this is hot stuff, right?
Of course.
Now, before I mention Elon Musk, there's a chap who was an American boy genius, right? And like Scott Ritter, he's discredited to some extent on the internet, you know, even though a lot of people. David Adair has been, but he was a boy genius, and in 1971, he produced this electromagnetic fusion containment engine, and the RAF, American RAF, sponsored him. He was a genius since he was about 6 or 7, and he developed this engine. They gave him everything he wanted, and this is in 1971, and they didn't see exactly what he was doing. They gave him everything he wanted, but they did a test from White Sands when it was done. And, I mean, now we hear China's got hypersonic missiles, Russia's got hypersonic missiles, Russia's one can hit London within 7 minutes, so, right? But in 1971, this green boy genius American, David Adair, I've seen all his videos and interviews and read everything, you know, sort of pertaining and sort of, and he was taken to White Sands. He did this test, and in 1971 it went 0 to 8,654 miles per hour, right, to the Nevada desert. He was taken over there by the RAF and that. When he got there, the Americans had an ex-German Nazi rocket scientist that had been working with them, Arthur Rudolph, and he came on the scene, and he overheard some of the top military people were rubbing their hands more or less, saying like, "Oh, we can get first strike with this. We can develop." And this boy, he kind of wasn't. He'd been developing rocket propulsion system, and this was something none of them had. It was just far advanced, and even now they've got nothing like it. And he overheard them saying, "This is first strike," and he realized they were wanting to hit Russia, you know, and just take out the Russian enemy. And he sort of made some pretense, and he sort of wanted to go and see his kind of in the desert where it had fallen, and the engine was still there, but he kind of was saying, "I just wanted to see," and they said, "Okay," he was pretending to cry. He's a boy genius, and he had graphite on these big door hangers, and he sort of was crying with his hands behind his back, put graphite on his hands secretly, and he was driven by some little guards out there, and he sabotaged it, right? And he destroyed it, and this Rudolph, this American, the Nazi Rudolph, Arthur Rudolph, that went and slapped him on the face. And some of the American GIs and that, back at base, once Rudolph realized, they raised the rifles up and cocked the rifles, and they're pointing at Rudolph because they didn't like to see one American boy, 17, slapped, you know. And even the top American general realized and said, "Oh, you know, don't ever develop one of those engines again." Well, my point is, David Adair is an incredible genius, and even now, they keep him on board. They've made him a regional director at Homeland Security, Federal Protective Service. He's an incredible genius, you know, but he knows, he more or less saved the world from a terrible disaster and saved millions of lives in 1971. Now, he said one of the things, the last thing I'll say about David Adair before I get to Elon Musk, is that he said he'd met so many people and powerful, all American power and institutions. They were trying to woo him and trying to get him. And he did go into service, but just ordinary service, not, And but he said he said in recent years that he met some of the 1%ers, right? The richest people and whatever. And he said half of them, sort of with all their multi-billions and super yachts, they sort of want to give something back, some of them when he met, want to do something back to the infrastructure, and the other half are just thinking of themselves. Now, Elon Musk, Scott Ritter was asked in an interview recently, what would you say to, after he was first taken off Twitter, he was asked, what would you say to Elon Musk? He's bought a percentage and whatever, and if he can control and alter things, what would you say to him? And Scott Ritter looked at the camera and said, I don't trust you, show us, what you can do, sort of prove. The proof is in the pudding. That was his word. The proof is in the pudding.
Of course, the proof is in the pudding. Of course, Kevin, the proof is in the pudding. And we have the proof about the puddings who are currently running Twitter. We already know that. So, as you and I cannot determine this outcome, we can only hope either that the puddings currently running it hold on, or that their apple cart is overturned. I'm for disruption of it. I want it overturned. I don't trust the people who are currently running it, and I have ample reasons not to do so. Thanks for that. I'll check out that boy genius. Let's go to Caroline in my old stamping ground of Coatbridge. Go ahead, Caroline.
Yes, good evening, George. What is about the propaganda here, when you have an opinion on Putin and it favours Putin, people seem to gang up on you, including family and friends. Now, they won't, as you said a week ago in a podcast during the week, I loved what you said, you can just touch your computer or your phone to find out and do due diligence, so you can hear the other side. I mean, I'm getting sick and tired of listening to this is happening, that's happening, but there isn't any real source. There's no real source. And something else, may I thank you for the work that you do for the Palestinian people. I laughed out loud when I saw you on Big Brother. I never laughed out loud when my big brother told me, do you know why he's in that, Caroline? And when he explained to me, I was ashamed to think that you were just there you were there to earn money for the Palestinian people. Thank you. And I was also there when you gave a speech for the Ballymurphy, and you'll keep that going as well. So thank you for doing both, George. And can you give me your opinion on people like me who have a different opinion, like yourself, on Putin, and why we get a barrage of abuse from family and colleagues? Thank you. Your opinion on it, please.
Well, God bless you. God bless you, Caroline, and your big brother for your kind words and his kind words back then. I tried to deal with this in my monologue. I didn't put it perhaps as succinctly as I might have. Here's the point. It is literally foolish to only study one side of a problem, because if you don't study the other side of the problem, how can you possibly know that the conclusion that you have reached in your study of one half of the problem is the correct conclusion? I mean, you don't need to be Einstein to work that out. It's obvious that you need to know everything that's happening. You need to know everybody's point of view before you can reach a conclusion, either of your own or reach a conclusion to support your own government and your own media. And when you factor in that our own government and our own media are inveterate liars on a gigantic scale, and who in the lifetime of everybody watching this have told us lie after lie after lie after lie, why do you imagine uncritically that they're telling you the truth about Ukraine when they are forbidding you even to see the other side of the story? Only an idiot would do that. Unfortunately, we've got a lot of idiots. I had no idea that in 2022 we had so many idiots. But here's a point I want to make to you. It was Easter Sunday, of course. I was out all day amongst the public, at a car boot sale, a children's Easter egg hunt, in the streets, in the parks where I live. Hundreds of people, many hundreds of people, saw me. A significant number approached me to shake hands, to congratulate me on this or that. Most people completely ignored me. Not one single person upbraided me, criticized me, said any kind of bad word, or even gave me any kind of bad look. That wasn't the case in 2003 when I was public enemy number one over the Iraq war. I was the person identified more than any other in the country in defending Iraq, opposing the war, far higher than anybody else. I was routinely abused, assaulted. I was threatened. I was regularly assailed in the streets of this country over the Iraq war until, of course, it became clear that everything I had said had been right and everything the media and the politicians had told them had been false, except where it was an actual falsehood, a deliberate lie. I'm not getting that over Ukraine. So my calculation is that whilst support for the state narrative on Ukraine is indeed a mile wide, it's an inch deep. It has not penetrated deeply into the society and is already well past its peak in terms of support. And every time the gas price goes up, every time the petrol and the diesel price goes up, every time the cost of food goes up, every time a place closes and people are made unemployed happens, the varnish on the government's stance on Ukraine will be further rubbed off, and by the end it will stand naked. As I pointed out in my midweek show to which you alluded, even if people believe that all of this is Putin's fault, they can do nothing about Putin. They can't fight a nuclear war with him because that would mean the end of the world. They can't fight him on the conventional battlefield because that would quickly lead to a nuclear war and the end of humanity on this planet. They can't remove him from office. They can do nothing about Putin, nothing about Russia, but they can do something about their own political leaders who are standing naked in front of them. Joe Biden in particular, but Boris Johnson not far behind. Macron with 75% of the French against him, not far behind him. Schulz in Germany, perhaps the most precariously in power of them all. This narrative of the British and American governments and other Western governments is false. It is being proven to be false. The sanctions they have applied are hurting us more than them, and all of that will, in the end, constitute a price that has to be paid. Can I hear from Adam in Manchester? Go ahead, Adam.
Hi, George. Okay.
Okay, Adam. Nice to hear from you.
Well, I just listened to your monologue, and it just is a good segue for my next question, and it would be, should we believe the childish reasons provided to us by the mainstream media of the reasons of the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, they are childish, Adam. That's a very good characterization of them. They presuppose, quite correctly in many cases, that nobody knew anything about Ukraine until 7 weeks ago. Nobody knew what happened in 2014. Nobody knew the history of the Holocaust in the East. Nobody heard of the Nazis that dominated, controlled for a time as collaborators with the Nazis, the fascist battalions and regiments and core beliefs that the Western Ukrainians in their millions supported. It presupposes that people know nothing about any of that. And just to make sure that nobody quickly learns about it, those who talk of these things because they know them are marginalized, algorithmically strangled, cancelled if necessary, ridiculed, attacked, smeared, so that what they have to say will not be widely absorbed by the public. It is childish because it presupposes that the Ukraine can defeat Russia in a conventional war in Ukraine, which is obviously, patently false. It cannot possibly happen. Russia is a hypersonic nuclear superpower with an army of 1 million people. And that army is more than capable of completely leveling Ukraine if it chose to do so. It has not chosen to do so. I'm glad to say it could have already flattened Kiev in the way that we flattened Baghdad, that we flattened Belgrade, that we flattened Aleppo, that we flattened Mosul, that the Americans flattened Vietnam. It could have done that, Adam, but it has chosen not to do that because it is seeking to destroy the armed forces of the Ukraine, not the population of the Ukraine, not least because it has to live with the consequences afterwards. So it is, in a sense, a gigantic con, not just on the Ukrainians, to encourage them to keep fighting to the last drop of their blood for us, for Johnson, for Biden. It's a con on our people who are going to wake up one day soon to find that 100,000 soldiers of the Ukrainian army are now encircled in a cauldron and will have no choice but to surrender. And that the war in the east of the country will be at an end, and that the country will de facto have been partitioned, and that the Western Ukraine will have no access to the sea and will become a tremendous burden on the European Union, who seem to be fast-tracking its membership. I'm glad that we're not amongst those who are going to be paying unimaginable sums in subsidy to a Western Ukrainian entity, which, like Kosovo before it, will become a NATO protectorate with no meaningful economy at all. Its people will leave the Western Ukrainian lands and circulate throughout the European Union as workers, and some of them as not workers. And the others will be entirely dependent on the taxpayers of the European Union. Now, of course, Russia will pay a high price in public opinion for that. But that looks to me the most likely outcome of the war. Two Ukraines, an Eastern Ukraine and a Western Ukraine. The difference is the Eastern Ukraine's where all the agricultural fertility and gigantic wheat production, second largest in the world, is, and the industrial base, which is, as it has always been, close to the Russian border in the Donbass area, areas which will forevermore, it would appear, be under Russian control. So it's a con on the Ukrainians, it's a con against us. Now, question 4. I'm not being very disciplined with these. In this week, in 1985, a Western pop group, a combo, became the first to release an album in China. Ooh, if you get this one, I'm a Dutchman. Who were they? A. Wham B, REM, C, madness. It's all madness. I'll give you the answer right after the break.
You know, and it's a very, thank you for, you know, I'm a big fan of your show, Gigi. Great debate, great. And I'm Scottish. I'm very passionate about what's happening there, you know. I had a great mom. She was Scottish, Mary McLeod. She taught me well. She taught me well at everything, including golf. I love Scotland, and I love the Scottish food. It's great food. I said to Melania, you know, haggis, look at that. What's more Scottish than that? Me. I am that haggis. She said, what, thin-skinned and full of crap?
You are listening to the mother of all talk shows with George Galloway.
My good wife's got the website back up. It's MOATS.tv. Go to it, please, and donate your share in the costs of keeping this show running. If you gave handsomely last week, the week before, take a holiday. But if you haven't given your share, you must do, and you can do it at moats.tv/donate. So go to moats.tv, that's our website. You can even watch the show from there now, by the way, and go to the donate button. But if you're having any difficulty at all with that, please do it through PayPal. Now, thanks to all our subscribers and listeners to the MOATS podcast, which has undoubtedly been our greatest success of all. It's now available, as always, on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Just search MOATS with George Galloway to find the alternative news podcast. If you're not listening already, go and find it. If you love it, like the hundreds of thousands of listeners who already do, please subscribe or follow us and give us a 5-star review, one of the best, and The Truth Shall Set You Free, one of those red pill podcasts that will set your mind free, says Raz. Or Speaking Truth to Power for Generations. Mr. Galloway, a national, a multinational, yes, a world cultural and political treasure, a living prophet still speaking truth to power for generations. Dr. Mark Williams. Thank you, Doctor. I ain't no prophet, but there is profit in listening to me. And if people had done so throughout my life, very great problems would have been avoided. Who was it in this week in 1985 that became the first to release an album in China? Why the Chinese allowed this, I have no idea. It was REM. Let's go to David in Nottingham. Go ahead, David.
Hi, George. Good evening. Firstly, may I just say, as an ex-member of Big Flame Group, I don't really remember them. We used to be big Labour supporters. Labour seems to have chopped
a very
off
good
group,
friend of mine who died tragically young, David, a very close friend of mine who died tragically young, Bobby Owens. He was the Merseyside secretary of my union, the Transport and General Workers Union. He was a member of Big Flame, and because I loved him, I can't hate Big Flame. Go ahead.
No. What I'd like to say is this Russia and Ukraine, I think NATO are testing their advanced weapon. I mean, they've had eight years of training and arming the Ukrainians. I think they're testing their advanced weapons against Russia's to kind of, before you get in a battle.
It's not working all that. It's not working out all that well, Dave.
No. Ukraine seems to be just it's a money launderer for the, all the money being pumped in seems to go in.
That's what I think.
And then billions of it goes back to whoever, just corrupt officials at the top. Another point.
That's exactly what I think it is, Dave.
I was a comedian getting billions in 2 years of being president of Ukraine. I mean, it's just.
Well, let's not exaggerate, David. He's not a billionaire, but President Zelensky has a personal wealth of $560 million. We know that from the Pandora Papers. How a comedian in the poorest country in Europe can amass a fortune of $560 million will be a question for the ages. Let's go to the news with Elliot King.
Home Secretary Priti Patel was warned by her top civil servant that there was not enough evidence of the deterrent effect of the plan to send some asylum seekers to Rwanda. In a letter, Matthew Rycroft said the policy's value for money relied on it preventing illegal channel crossings. He said while there wasn't sufficient evidence of the scheme's benefits, that did not mean it wouldn't work. The Home Secretary replied it would be imprudent to allow a lack of modelling to delay the scheme. The exchange between Patel and her permanent secretary was published by the Home Office after it emerged she had issued a rare ministerial direction to push through the plans, meaning she takes personal responsibility for it. Under the £120 million scheme, which was announced last week, people deemed to have entered the UK unlawfully will be transported to the East African country, where they will be allowed to reapply for the right to settle. A huge queue of trucks has formed on the Poland-Belarus border as a Russian and Belarusian drivers try to leave the EU following a sanctions deadline. In the run-up to the Saturday deadline, the line extended to 80 kilometres, with some stuck for up to 32 hours. The EU has banned lorries from Russia and Belarus, except those carrying medicine, mail or petroleum products, from entering or staying in the bloc. The move is part of the sanctions over Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Drone footage filed by Reuters news agency shows long queues remaining as the midnight deadline neared. Hours after the deadline passed, the waiting times had been shortened to 12 hours, with the number of trucks at two border crossings between 230 and 400 vehicles. However, it is unclear what will happen to thousands of other trucks from the two countries estimated to currently be on EU territory. Northern Korea says it has successfully tested a new weapon, which it says will significantly enhance its tactical nuclear capabilities. Photos show the country's leader, Kim Jong-un, smiling and clapping as he watches the new missile's launch. Experts believe this is a sign that North Korea is planning to test a compact nuclear weapon soon. In other words, a tactical nuclear weapon. North Korea stopped nuclear testing back in 2017. The following year, it blew up tunnels at the Pyongyang nuclear testing site in a move that was seen as part of a diplomatic reapproach with South Korea and the US. New allegations have emerged regarding lockdown parties in Downing Street, with the Labour Party claiming Boris Johnson has deliberately misled the British people at every turn. The Prime Minister has already been fined once for breaking COVID rules on his birthday in 2020, but that is said to be regarding at least problematic of a series of incidents. Johnson is understood to have been present at 6 or at least 12 gatherings being investigated by the Metropolitan Police, including that Bring Your Own Booze one in the Downing Street Garden on the 20th of May 2020. The Prime Minister's fines for breaching lockdown rules is the most severe constitutional crisis involving a Prime Minister, an eminent historian has said. History of government expert Lord Hennessy says Johnson has broken the law, misled Parliament and shredded the ministerial code. The Prime Minister is the first serving Prime Minister to be sanctioned for breaking the law. Speaking after news of the fine was announced, he said his people have the right to expect better from him. Johnson has said since it did not occur to him at the time that the brief gathering in the Cabinet Room to mark his birthday in June 2020 could be in the contravention of COVID law rules. He is known to have attended at least 2 further events, of 12 being investigated by police, meaning he could be fined again. 5 people have been arrested after 2.9 tonnes of cocaine, worth about 72 million euros, was seized on a fishing boat on the Canary Islands. The AKT-1 was stopped by the Spanish Coast Guard and escorted to Las Palmas, the capital city of Gran Canaria, on Wednesday. Spain's El Dia newspaper reported that the police and tax agency were also involved in the operation, and officers were waiting ashore when the vessel arrived. A spokesman for the Spanish Civil Guard said, "We are trying to confirm the amount of drugs on board." Pictures were published showing officials on board with at least a dozen large white bags on the back of the boat. Pope Francis has urged leaders to hear the people's pleas for peace in the Ukraine. Speaking during his Easter Sunday Mass to some 50,000 people in St. Peter's Square, he said, "Our eyes too are incredulous on this Easter of war. We have seen all too much blood, all too much violence. Our hearts too have been filled with fear and anguish." And finally, Fatau, a western lowland gorilla believed to be the oldest in the world, has just celebrated her 65th birthday at the Berlin Zoo. The zoo wrote on its Instagram, "Our gorilla lady is celebrating her 65th birthday today, making her the oldest gorilla in the world." The traditional birthday cake could not be missing this year either. The birthday meal is always something very special for Fatau, the zoo has said. Photos included in the post show the huge primate enjoying a cake decorated with berries and fruits to form the number 65. The gorilla arrived to Berlin in 1959 through what the zoo described as unusual circumstances. A sailor used the young gorilla to pay his tab at a tavern in Marseille, France, after which she was transported across Europe before eventually being purchased by the zoo in Germany. She was estimated to be just 2 years old at the time of her arrival. In 2019, Fatau was named the oldest living gorilla in captivity by the Guinness World Records after Trudy, a gorilla born in 1956, passed away. That's all for now. I'm Elliot King.
George Galloway, and the mother of all talk shows. Join us at the College of Knowledge, where there are no tuition fees.
Well, 8,600 people voted in that first poll, and overwhelmingly more than 3/4 of the vote went to Elon Musk. I don't know if he will succeed or not, and if he does, whether he will do what he says he will do or not. But that change is needed in Twitter, and that no change can be expected from the current board of directors. I, for one, hope that he succeeds. What you got to lose? Let's go to Orlando in Florida. Who wouldn't want to? Where Jason is on the line. Jason, welcome.
Good evening, George, from sunny Florida. How are you,
Nice
sir?
to hear from you. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
good. Thank you. Happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you as well. I wanted to ask you, sir, your thoughts on if Trump was reelected, do you think him and Putin could have come to some compromise before the Russian buildup and during the Russian buildup instead of just sitting on the fence like Biden did? What's your thoughts on that? I mean, I know it's a hypothetical question.
I think that Putin and Trump would have struck a deal, not just on Ukraine, but on the whole raft of issues that divide the United States from Russia, the arms control treaties that Trump walked away from, the Open Skies Treaty, the INF, Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, the attitude to the Iran nuclear deal, and so on. I think a grand bargain could have been struck by Trump. If Trump did not make the mistake that he did last time of surrounding himself with neocon warriors that couldn't fight their own way out of a paper bag, like John Bolton, who managed to scupper any decent foreign policy inclinations that Trump had. From the Democrats, I expected nothing, and we're getting worse than nothing. Joe Biden is not fit to send out for a loaf of bread, never mind in charge of world affairs as the so-called leader of the so-called free world. He's not able to button up his dressing gown, never mind handle the nuclear button. Jason, what do you think?
I'm actually, on the fence about everything. I try to look at everything from an outside perspective and not the corporate media here in the U.S.'s narrative. And all I know is they've been flooding, especially since Biden, but the neocons got their wish during Trump, flooding Ukraine with weapons. I mean, what did they think was going to happen? And we have gone back on our word.
They pumped it full of weapons and fervor. Yeah. Yes. They pumped it full of weapons and fervor precisely because they wanted this to happen.
Yes, absolutely.
They have cynically used Ukraine and its people. And the Biden family have, of course, mightily profited from their feasting on the Ukrainian people, like leeches.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, how did his son get on the board of Burisma? Gee, I wonder. And then why did we take a keen interest in Ukraine since they found all those gas deposits? I mean, that story's not being told to the U.S. public, by the way.
I think you just answered your own question there, Jason. Very well done. Thanks for that. Let's go to Eric in Virginia, staying in the United States. Go ahead, Eric.
All right. Hello, George. Happy Easter. I wanted to ask you if you think it's possible that Finland and Sweden could be blackmailed to join NATO, because I just don't trust the whole Western alliance. They've been able to corrupt almost every institution. They're able to collectively lie. All the newspapers are saying the same things. I'm just wondering, at what point do you think we'll reach a point where we almost have a global dictatorship, considering the corruption just in about every Western government?
We won't have a global dictatorship because the Chinese and the Russians ain't going anywhere, and neither is India, and neither is Pakistan, and neither is Brazil and South Africa and Iran and Venezuela. They're not going anywhere. So there won't be a global dictatorship, but there sure is emerging a dictatorship in Western countries, which is dictated from Washington by a man who can scarcely keep his trousers up. And all the European leaders behave like lemmings, jumping over a cliff at his behest and in his interests. I don't believe that Finland will join NATO because that would be a casus belli, that would be a cause of war. Because, as I pointed out the other night, the northeast border of Ukraine is 200 miles from Moscow. The border of Finland to St. Petersburg, the second city in Russia, well, you could practically throw a stone from the Finnish border and land it in the streets of St. Petersburg. So there's absolutely no way that Russia will tolerate American nuclear weapons, NATO nuclear bases, a stone's throw from St. Petersburg. Why would they? America wouldn't tolerate it in El Paso. The Americans wouldn't tolerate it on the border between Canada and the United States. Why would they? The United States wouldn't even tolerate it in Cuba, 90 miles away, and half a century or more ago. So nobody would. No nuclear-armed superpower is going to allow a hostile nuclear-armed superpower to set up base camp a stone's throw away from its second biggest city and arguably its most magnificent city of them all, the former Leningrad, former Petrograd, and of course formerly the capital of Russia itself. Sweden, I wouldn't trust as far as I could throw them. I don't believe they've ever been neutral. They claim that they were neutral in the Second World War, but in fact, they were active collaborators with Nazi power in the Second World War. And Mr. IKEA, who now can be found on Stepan Bandera Avenue in the heart of Kiev, Mr. IKEA was the leading Nazi in Sweden. Don't trust their meatballs. And certainly don't trust their flat packs. Thanks, Eric, for that. Magnus is in England, in the West Midlands. Go ahead, Magnus.
Hello, George.
Hi.
Oh, no, great to speak to you, George. I was on one of the Iraq demonstrations in 2003, something like that, and I ran into David Fromm, the architect of the Axis of Evil speech, and I said to him, George, I said, come with me, Dave. Come listen to George Galloway. Come and hear what he's got to say. Now, he declined that offer, but no, I've been a great fan of yours for many years. Now, I wanted to speak to you about left and right, and how the world has changed and the concepts of left and right. Because I've always been very left wing. I was out there on the doorsteps for Jeremy Corbyn, for two general elections. And I gave up on the Labour Party finally because of the, not just the way the Labour Party hung him out to dry, but because of the way that the media mobilised. And as COVID came along, and whilst I was on board with the initial, the narrative initially, I became increasingly suspicious about the things that I was seeing. And now we've got this this situation where I'm in the position of liking Tucker Carlson quotes, which is nothing that I could ever have conceived of at any point in the past. But what I wanted to ask your opinion on was this idea of how we get the left and the right and those phrases that are becoming increasingly redundant to actually mean something going forward. And I would like to identify the concept of plutocrats and the kleptocracy that worldwide billionaire class is perpetrating on the population of the world. And to me, it seems that this is something that working class, middle class people around the world are all united in identifying the thieves that the billionaire class are, the way they use offshore banking to absolutely rinse out every single economy in the world. And once we've clearly identified an enemy, then that's the way that we can unite, and move forward to actually make the world a livable place for
I agree, Magnus. That's the best call of the night so far. It is the $64,000 question. The hour does not allow me to do it justice, but I'll try succinctly to respond to the powerful points that you made. It's true that there's a lot of political cross-dressing going on. It's part of the identity politics mania that has been a hallmark of these last 10 years or so. People who claim to be left love the European Union. People who claimed to want to take back control from the European Union want to hand it over to Joe Biden, of all people. People who said that they wanted freedom of speech and expression as an article of faith of a democratic society are the very first to demand its suppression and ever tougher rules to strangle it and kill it. So there's a lot of cross-dressing. I myself am not left. I'm a socialist. I'm a common sense socialist. That's how I would define myself. I no longer define myself as left because that which most people see as the left are deeply unattractive to them and utterly repugnant to me. If to be left you've got to love the European Union, no thanks. NATO, no thanks. The channeling of young confused children down the rapid escalator to sex changes and beta blockers and puberty blockers and all of these things, no thanks. The thrusting down the throats of our young children highly sexualized propaganda, advertising, and some aspects of education. If that's left, count me out. I ain't left. In fact, you'd consider me socially, culturally conservative with a small c. I'm economically radical with a capital R, and I have foreign policy views which are radically different from both left and right. I believe in socialism. I believe in social-ism. In the economy, the commanding heights of it anyway, being run in the interests of the mass of the people, rather than for the enrichment of the few. Now, that makes me sound old-fashioned. Maybe I am. If I am, it's because of my age, but most importantly, my class. I come from the working class. I stand for no one but the working class. I care only for the betterment of the working class. Who are the working class? They are the more than 90% of our people who depend upon their labor to live. That if they had no wages next month, or maybe 2 months, they would be in a state of absolute poverty. They are a couple of big bills away, a burst boiler, a ruined sump or chassis in the car, away from economic disaster. Unable, never mind having to struggle to pay, but unable to pay the rising bills that are already on the shelves and are coming rapidly down the pipeline. These are the people for whom I stand. It's 90% of the people who depend upon their labor to live, or who are too old now to labor and depend on the social value of the collective contribution to their life in pensions and in benefits and so on. Or the children of the workers not yet old enough to work, but who will one day be the workers in the country. That makes me a socialist, but leftist I am not. For me, what passes for left now is liberal, with a small l, although it's quite a big small l. It is about individualism, it is selfish, it is faddist, it follows every Californian cult idea that washes up on our shores and treats it as gospel. I believe in the sacred, which has been allowed to be profaned. I believe in the solid, which has been allowed to melt into air. That's me. And if you follow me, then support the Workers' Party of Britain. Follow me, support this show, because that is the core set of beliefs that we believe in. But you don't have to follow me. You don't have to believe me. You've just got to believe that I've got the right to speak, and you've got the right to hear me, and you've got the right to call me and express your point of view without a billionaire, without the state, without a regulator stamping on our throats, blocking off our ears, cutting off our brains. Sorry, that was a long answer, Magnus, but I felt the need to say it. Now, we've been unable to get Gonzalo Lira, and so we've got Scott Ritter. Scott Ritter, aforementioned at length in my monologue, joins us now on the line. Scott, thanks for joining us. Let's clear something up. We're extremely worried about the whereabouts of Gonzalo Lira. Somebody said earlier that he was on your show today and that therefore he's safe and well. Can you confirm that?
No, I don't have a show. In today's, you're the first person I've talked to in a, in an official capacity today beyond my family. It's Easter Sunday. The last time I had any interaction with Mr. Lira was on Friday, and that was only by following his Telegram feed. So I have no information whatsoever about where he is or what his status is in regards to his safety. I'm hoping for the best.
Yes, well, we were in touch with him on Friday also, but in writing. So we can't even verify that the people or person who was writing back to us was in fact him. all kinds of people, Ben Cohen amongst them, people of great substance and importance, are extremely worried about his safety because he is in Kharkov. And Kharkov is, I would imagine, still a hotly contested area. What could you tell us, Scott, albeit at your distance, of what the military situation is in Kharkov?
Well, I mean, what we know based upon the available information is that Kharkov is still controlled by the Ukrainian government. More worrisome is that the defense of Kharkov appears to be being controlled not by a military officer from the Ukrainian Armed Forces or a civilian leader, of normal political affiliation, but rather the Nazis, the Azov battalion and their ilk. They recently mobilized, and I think Mr. Lira highlighted this. They emptied the prisons and took the most violent prisoners and armed them, and turned them into a right-wing militia. And what we know in terms of past practice is that these militias aren't frontline troops. These militias actually roam the city streets looking for dissenters, collaborators, shirkers, whatever term they want to use, and they kill them. And so, Kharkov right now is not only a city under siege from Russia, but a city under the grip of terror from the Azov and their right-wing political progeny. Much like Mariupol was and is. We have a situation now where the city of Mariupol is about to fall. The final few thousand defenders are trapped like rats underneath in the tunnels and basements of the Azov steel factory. But they have with them civilians and foreigners whom they're holding hostage. They're actually holding hostage the Ukrainian army. The Azov leadership in Kiev has denied anybody the right to surrender. It's fight to the death, and anybody who seeks to surrender will be shot. So this is what we're dealing with in Kharkov. The Russians are investing it on three sides. I believe the Russians do not intend to capture Kharkov straight off, because that would be another Mariupol, but rather to surround it, invest it, bypass it, and move on to their primary mission of destroying the bulk of the Ukrainian armed forces that are currently trapped in the Donbass region. But Kharkov is definitely a city that is firmly in the grip of the Nazis, and anybody who lives in that city, such as Mr. Lira, who is not of that political persuasion, is at risk.
Well, that's very sobering indeed. Let's all pray on this Easter Sunday that he reappears and that we see and hear from him soon. It's sad that the hopes that we had, that he had in fact spoken with you today, are dashed. We also spoke to him on Friday, and that's the last, I think, that any of us have spoken with him. I don't know if he could have escaped from Kharkov and might reappear somewhere else, or that some harm has befallen him. We must ask the Chilean government, whose citizen he is, to do everything that they can to demand to know what's happened to him. And let's put him to one side with the most earnest of prayers for his safekeeping. And let me ask you about the military situation in general. We hear that 100,000 Ukrainian army soldiers will soon be surrounded in what the Russians call a cauldron. I'm familiar, as you are, with the concept of a cauldron. The German army that was destroyed at Stalingrad was caught in a cauldron. Basically, the two sides of the Russian armed forces come together, and everyone caught in the middle is in a cauldron. How close is that cauldron to being achieved, in your view?
Well, I mean, I believe that it could be achieved tomorrow if the Russians are willing to take the casualties. But Vladimir Putin, in his address last week, made it clear that Russia is working on a timetable that is, what he said, very literate. And what he meant by that is by the book. And that the goal isn't just to destroy the enemy, but to minimize casualties. That there's no rush. He's not working under any artificial timelines. He doesn't care about what the West wants, what you want, what I want, what anybody wants. He cares about what's best for Russia. And that means that they are going to build up the forces necessary and then apply the firepower necessary and then slowly apply the maneuver. And I've watched, first of all, the artillery that's being brought to bear right now is unlike anything the world's seen since the Second World War. And it's intense concentrations of hell brought to earth, and anybody in their path is killed or incapacitated. There's no surviving this. And the Russians are literally going forward one grid at a time, clearing it out and moving forward. Their tanks are not doing the World War II charge up the middle where anti-tank guns can knock them out. They're using terrain masking. It's very slow but very careful. They locate the enemy. They move their tanks into a firing position using terrain to mask them, and then they kill the enemy. And then they repeat that as much as necessary during the day, making slow 3, 4, 5 kilometer advances, but killing everything in their path. This is what's happening. And I think sooner rather than later, we're going to see the southern pincer and the northern pincer come together. And when they do, there will be a very, very desperate situation for the Ukrainians. And again, we go back to the Battle of Mariupol as an example. The Ukrainian government has been deceiving its people about what has happened there, the casualties they've suffered. The Russians have made it clear that they've killed upwards of 9,000 to 10,000 Ukrainian soldiers, and by the time this battle's over, they're going to be adding another 3,000 to 4,000. These are horrific numbers, and this is just in Mariupol. This doesn't include the 30,000 that they've killed elsewhere. And when these numbers become known, and they are known to the Ukrainian military, morale is just going to plummet. And when morale plummets in a military organization, troops tend to break, troops tend to run, troops tend to surrender. And I'm fairly confident that's what the future of the Ukrainian army is going to be in the next weeks, and in the weeks coming, that are coming.
Let me ask you, if I may, about a strange thing that was reported today. We knew about Germany running out of tanks, couldn't send any more tanks. We know that Canada, which has been a big armorer of the Ukrainian armed forces, is itself running short of weapons. But we learned from the Pentagon that fully 1/3 of the American stockpile of anti-tank munitions had been given to Ukraine, and that Ukraine was getting through every single day a week's worth of anti-tank munitions. And yet, unless you're going to correct me, I don't see much evidence that they've been taking out many tanks. Which begs a question to me: what happened to all those American munitions?
When you take a look, the Russians are starting to release the award citations for their soldiers for acts of heroism, and many of these are to tankers, and they talk about advancing under intense fire, receiving 3, 4 different hits from Javelin missiles from the in-laws, and continuing to operate, maneuvering to destroy 6, 8 of the Ukrainian vehicles. My point is, the Javelin against a stationary target, may kill or incapacitate that target. But the Javelin against a moving target appears not to have that much effect. And this isn't just a single award, it's repeated. These stories are repeated. They've also shown videos of their tanks being repaired, and they show where a tank has been struck, 3 times by Javelins or the in-laws, which is the British equivalent. And while there is scarring and there's some damage, the tank survives and the crew survives. So, again, the world has allowed the Ukrainian government to create a narrative of the efficiency of the Javelin as a tank killer, when the reality is far different. Against a well-equipped, well-trained enemy that doesn't panic, the Javelin is a nuisance, and if the tank remains static, that the Javelin can kill it. But if you're moving, and some of the more advanced Russian tanks have countermeasures that are designed for the Javelin and for the NLAW. So I think what we've seen is a great deal of hype. I'm not going to minimize the lethality of any munition. This is war, and when you make a mistake, you die. And the Russians have made mistakes, and they've died, but not in the numbers that the Ukrainians have said. And their tanks are definitely not, butter to the hot knife of the Ukrainian Javelin. This has been a propaganda exercise in the extreme, and I believe that when this is all said and done, and the Russians start putting out their version of the story that's going on, we'll find that the Javelins weren't quite the game changer that the West proclaims it to be. But and more critically now, think about what you just said. 1/3 of the American arsenal has been used in a war that, although it's intense, is not as intense as a full-scale war between NATO and Russia would be, which tells me that the Americans are going to run out of all of their Javelins within a month of fighting Russia. And when that happens, there's nothing left. So I think NATO is waking up to the fact that war is an extremely wasteful proposition, meaning that you buy all these weapons and all this ammunition, and it gets expended rapidly. And unless you've bought a lot more, you've got nothing left over. And the Russians have prepared. They have the reserves. They have the ammunition. The Ukrainians have been receiving ammunition. A lot of it's being destroyed. A lot of it's not getting to the front. But when it gets to the front, it's being used by people who aren't trained properly. This is the other thing that people need to understand. The Ukrainian infantry received a very low level of training. Their employment of the Javelin is not as sophisticated as it needs to be in the modern battlefield. So they're using the weapon when it shouldn't be used. They're using it in wasteful ways, and they're just not as deadly as the Western media has made them out to be.
Scott Ritter, I'm much obliged to you. Thank you very much on Easter Sunday for joining us. There's a new poll out. Should Boris Johnson resign after being fined for breaking lockdown rules? A, yes, and B, no. Thousands of people have already voted, and I haven't announced it yet. And I'm afraid for Boris Johnson, it doesn't make great reading. On Twitter, 66% say yes, he should resign. On my YouTube channel, 83% say he should resign. And on my Telegram channel, 88% think he should resign. So you better get your vote in whichever way you're leaning on that subject. Now, don't forget to, by the way, follow me on Patreon, patreon.com/George Galloway. There's lots of hot new content on that. And Shaun Attwood, only Shaun Attwood, is up right after this.
There is no trick other than hard work, creativity, care, and recognizing that duty is more important than love.
The booming voice of Robert Maxwell, an arrogant man who used his publishing empire to gain him power and influence. But in this shocking account, never told before in this way, George Galloway recalls his first encounter with Maxwell.
It looked like a grizzly bear advancing towards me and punches me with these giant fists like sides of ham, right in the solar plexus. So hard that I literally bent double.
Then, after George exposed Maxwell as a crook in Parliament, it was war.
Every one of his papers, the Daily Mirror, then following the Sunday Mirror, the Sunday People, the Daily Record, then a few days later the Sunday Mail in Scotland. Even the European, which he then owned. All over Galloway.
Scottish Daily News journalist Ron Mackay was there.
Every night, presumably when he had a drink in him, he would boom over the tannoy about the cretins, the fools. The majority of the workforce believed that he would take it over and their jobs would be secure. But of course he didn't. He just disappeared.
And then...
The millionaire newspaper publisher Robert Maxwell is dead.
What really happened? Did Robert Maxwell jump, or was he pushed?
It could be that he went out to, as he did, micturate over the side of the boat. I'm with Ghislaine Maxwell in that I lean towards the murder.
This is Maxwell, the monster.
You said, what is my secret? I will let you and your viewers know what it is. I'm not attached to property. Consequently, losing it or gaining it means nothing to me.
That's actually one of the most popular things I've ever done, that Robert Maxwell mini documentary. It's there on patreon.com/George Galloway, and lots more, including my audio book. I suppose you could call it a biography of the 1970s, with a lot of autobiographical material about my life in the 70s. I was quite something in the 70s, you know. And so were the events, political, cultural. I just watched The Godfather again last night. It was an era of magnificent movies, great music, tumultuous political events that you can hardly imagine nowadays. The liberation of Vietnam from colonial occupation, the liberation of Spain and Portugal from fascism, Greece from fascism, European countries, amazing. Some of them are headed back in that direction now. That's first episode on Monday on my Patreon channel. The poll is not reading very good for Boris Johnson. You better get your vote in if you're a Boris Johnson supporter. Now, Shaun Attwood is the host of True Crime Podcast. He's an author, a speaker, and a YouTuber. Boy, is he a YouTuber. And we're very lucky to have him on the mother of all talk shows this evening. Shaun, welcome back. It's been some time. The proximate reason why I wanted to talk with you is about that very man, Maxwell, or rather his favourite child, Ghislaine Maxwell, the paramour of Jeffrey Epstein, who was quite surprised to find he'd committed suicide in a New York penitentiary. She has been denied a retrial. She hasn't yet been sentenced. What's your latest take on the whole Epstein-Maxwell affair?
Well, first off, huge thank you, George, for having me on in this era of algorithmic strangulation and fascist fact-checkers. my own channel was nuked twice over my Epstein-Maxwell Prince Andrew coverage. We had 60 million views. Huge thank you to the viewers who lobbied YouTube to get my channel back up. So I've got to be very careful what I say. But basically, massive shout out and congratulations to the brave survivors, Virginia, Maria Farmer, Annie Farmer, for taking these super predators down. Maxwell now is facing anywhere from 40 to 65 years because she got found guilty of 5 of the 6 counts against her. And that's a huge success in the war against the super predators. However, there is a theory that some backsheesh is going to get kicked down to a appeals court judge because of Maxwell's links to the Clinton crime family and the Biden crime family, and she's going to get out when public opinion dies down on this case, but we'll see. Hopefully she'll get a maximum sentence and she'll spend the rest of her life in prison facing what happens to sex offenders in the American prison system, which is not very nice.
Well, she is 60, so even if she didn't spend 40 behind bars, if she even spent 10 behind bars, she'd be 70, obviously, when she re-emerged. And it's quite likely she'll be able to serve not less than 10, I would have thought. What's your current take on this question, though, if you're able to say? So far, Epstein's been arrested, Maxwell has been arrested and convicted, but what about all the people they were pimping for? Why have none of them been arrested?
All right, so if you look at the pyramid, I mean, Maria Farmer said that the head of the snake was Leslie Wexner. Look at how Epstein acquired his wealth. The property was basically handed over to him, the New York property, and then he got hundreds of millions from various, let's say, big names in finance. I won't reel them all off right now because I don't want to cause you any legal situations. So that wealth was manufactured over to him, and there is a theory that it was part of a honey trap operation. Now, these honey trap operations have been around forever. We just interviewed a guy who was a victim of the Kincora Boys Home honey trap operation, Richard Kerr, absolutely heartbreaking story. So even though the mid-level people have been taken out of the loop, the big names, Bill Clinton, for example, the Queen's favorite son, for example, I mean, these people are untouchable.
Do you think, is the Prince Andrew story over now that he made a financial settlement? And have you any idea what that financial settlement might have been?
I can't recall the exact amount of the financial settlement. It would be a tragedy if the British taxpayers were paying 1 penny of that. But looking at what happened to Maxwell, 4 bail bond hearings, completely unnecessary. She was liquidated by her lawyers. And I think Prince Andrew was about to go over the same cliff. To save the royal family's public image, he did the right thing, because if he had have gone to trial, it would have been the biggest story all over the world, continuously, months and months on end, which we were hoping for, so we could expose these people more. But in the interest of the royal family, he was probably advised, you know, they shut it down, basically. You can't go ahead and do this. But he would have been liquidated by his own lawyers and made a fool of himself and found guilty anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
And what's your current thinking on the strange suicide of Jeffrey Epstein? Did he hang himself with paper sheets with no drop?
We've just had the strange suicide of Jean-Luc Brunel. So you've got, a guy that Epstein boasted. Yeah. Epstein boasted he slept with over 1,000 girls from Jean-Luc Brunel, including 12-year-old triplets, which he boasted gave him such great oral sex. This was his birthday present from Jean-Luc Brunel. Suicided in the French prison. Epstein suicided in the federal prison in New York with fractures to the hyoid bones, indicative of, he was suicided, not committing suicide. So never in the history of that jail have 2 guards fallen asleep simultaneously, which is what happened. His cellmate was removed the night before. The stars aligned completely to allow this to happen. And then for the other main procurer of kids, Jean-Luc Brunel, to be found hung in his cell, I'm surprised it hasn't happened to Maxwell. And I think the only thing perhaps that's gone in her favor is because the Black Book was not Epstein's book. The Black Book was Ghislaine Maxwell's Black Book. She was the one with the contacts. He was the one with the wealth. And her contacts included top levels of royalty, top levels of politics in America, including the Clinton crime family. So I think she's got power through them. And with Biden coming in, that's why this theory of the backsheesh and her getting out on an appeal, Bill Cosby style, might happen. And we're all watching to see if that does happen.
Well, we'll all be watching you for first signs of that. Shaun Attwood, how do people follow you now? I appreciate your social media as a moving target. What's the best place for people to follow your work?
All my socials are under my name, Shaun Attwood, S-H-A-U-N-A-T-T Wood, including my YouTube channel. My book is called Who Killed Epstein? Prince Andrew or Bill Clinton? Available worldwide on Amazon. Thank you, George, for letting me come back.
That's a provocative title. That'll be staring out to me in Waterstones, not.
Might be too hot for Waterstones.
How do people get that book, Shaun?
Yeah, it's How do people get that book? Who Killed Epstein is available worldwide on Amazon as a paperback, ebook, and an audiobook.
I'm sure it's going to go like hotcakes. Shaun Attwood, as always, thank you very much indeed for joining us on the mother of all talk shows. It's not looking good for Boris Johnson. You've still got 10 minutes maybe to vote on that. Let's hear from Jimmy in England, in Yorkshire, on Elon Musk. Go ahead, Jimmy.
Oh, hi, George. Hi. Thanks for taking my call. Yeah, I just wanted to say I'd like Elon Musk to be a hero as much as anyone else. But there's a couple of things which make me a little bit dubious. First of all, he tweeted once upon a time, someone mentioned something about a coup in Bolivia. I think they have some kind of mineral which he needs for his car batteries. And he said he replied on the Twitter. Yeah. He said, "Oh, we will coup whoever we want to." So he's had a few little instances like that.
It was a repugnant statement. A repugnant statement of an unfortunate truth. The United States can coup wherever it likes, or at least used to be able to. But yes, indeed, nobody here, certainly not me, is flying an Elon Musk flag for everything he's ever said or done. The question is, would you rather he was running Twitter with his public commitment to free speech principles, or the kings of Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, no, like I say, there's a lot of things I do like about the man, and I think he could be, a force for good. But the other thing that makes me kind of dubious is he famously doesn't pay a lot of tax because he holds stock, which is where he gets his huge net worth valuation. But in order to get the 40 billion or however much he would need to buy Twitter, he would need to first of all sell
43 billion is offered to buy the whole stock and take it private. Yeah.
Yeah, so what makes me skeptical is he would have to sell probably like half his shares in Tesla or something, and then he would have to pay a huge amount of tax on that in order to get to the 40 billion, if you know what I mean. So I just don't know whether he'd be willing to give up like half of his stock in his baby, his company, in order to buy Twitter.
Yeah, I mean, well, he's made a formal bid. If everyone takes it up, then if it's put to a vote and everyone takes it up, then he'll have to pay up. My guess is, though high finance is not my purview, that he'll use the cash mountain that he's got, and he will borrow the rest. Isn't that what these people do?
Right. Yeah. Well, you know more than me. No, I hope he does take up Twitter because, like you said.
Well, I think I think the shares have been flat for I think 9 years, Jimmy. The shares have been absolutely flat, and so they went up when he began to look interested. And of course, if he buys them at that price, he has to do something to make the company very much more profitable. And I think it would probably get a shot in the arm. I mean, I presume the first thing he'd do is bring back Donald Trump to Twitter, don't you? And that would attract enormous attention around the world and millions back to Twitter.
Yeah, well, I think we're about to see how much power the kind of establishment have in order to, because I think they'll do anything to stop Trump being back in the White House and back on Twitter.
I hope the second thing he does is, remove that fake label from my Twitter account. I live in hope. Jimmy in Yorkshire, thanks very much indeed for that call. The poll has closed. Nearly 5,000 people voted. And 66% on Twitter say that Boris Johnson should resign. 85% say he should resign on my YouTube channel, and 89% on my Telegram channel. Quite extraordinary. So, Boris, if you're watching, it hasn't gone as well for you tonight as it went for Elon Musk. Now, the big donors this week were Ryan P., Pamela C., and Akarim A. Thank you very much. Actually, there's more. So it's Ryan P., Pamela C., Akarim A., Nell H., Nasir M., Anne O.B., Gordon M., Joseph JCL, and Ivan Pedro. I take my hat off to all of you. Thank you very much indeed for your support. They're the big donors, but we won't need so many big donors if we get middle-sized donors and a lot of small donors. So I got to say, before I get the last call in, we have to pay for this show between now and next Sunday by donations. You can do it on our website, which is moats.tv, or you can do it by PayPal. Or you can contact us to do it some other way, but you must do it, please. Don't take a free ride and then see the university closed because you wouldn't stump up the cost of a cup of coffee in a transport cafe. It is a legend that's on the line. It's the legend called Kenny in Acton. Go ahead, Ken.
Good evening, George. I'd just like to say I've donated about £10 to your show so far over the last. Aye. I got released for the quarantine and all went well. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome, man. I just wanted to touch on what you said earlier about liberals.
The last time we spoke, but before you go on to that, the last time we spoke, you were a guinea pig. You were a guinea pig for a medical experiment to get yourself injected with, what was it, the flu or something?
Yeah, the flu. They were testing the nasal spray flu vaccine. So first they sprayed my nose with the flu vaccine, and then 3 days later they inoculated me in the inside of the nostrils with the flu virus. And then they done a nasal swab every day, and every time that happened, that made me sneeze. They made me fill out a health questionnaire, and then I got a bit of fever towards the end of the quarantine. But that went away the next day, and I got released. Yeah.
So you survived?
Yes.
You survived?
I did.
And you're considerably richer?
£3,500 richer. So I've never been to Italy before, so I'm going to go to Venice at the end of the month. Yeah.
Very nice. I hope you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll enjoy it. Just don't tell them you had the flu injected up your nose. Take my advice on that. Sorry, Kenny, what would you like to talk about?
I'd like to quickly touch on what you said about liberalism being obsessed with individualism. That's not entirely true, because liberalism is basically postmodernism. And the postmodern philosophy is basically identity politics. And they believe that group identity is paramount so that they can arrange you into victim versus oppressor. Hence the term that they're always obsessed with, white male privilege. Straight white male privilege. They don't care who you are as an individual. They only care about your gender, your race, and your sexuality, and any other way that they can arrange you as a victim or an oppressor. That's how they do it. Yeah.
Well, there's thee and me. We are Scottish, white, working class males, and we're both straight. So does that mean we're wallowing in privilege? You're so not wallowing in privilege. You were prepared to get the flu injected up your nose so you could get £3,000. Wealthy people of whatever colour and orientation would spend that on a good dinner.
Privilege is more about class than it is about identity, race and sexuality. You get overprivileged black people who've done very well for themselves, that are members of the so-called bourgeoisie, the highest earners in the United States.
And you get underprivileged white people.
Yeah, exactly. And the highest earners in the United States are Asians and Indians. They do much better economically than white Americans.
They're not getting the flu injected up their nose for £3,000. I'll tell you that. Kenny and Acton, thanks for that final call. I'll see you on Wednesday at 10 p.m. London time for my show. which is The Galloway Show. And I'll see you next Sunday, God willing, on the mother of all talk shows. Get donating, please.